My name is Mike Robertson. I say that because I realize some of you weren't expecting me or don't know who I am, but I also say it because I'm frequently mistaken for Joel Osteen. And I want to say one of the reasons is because today, like Joel always does, I want to start off by telling you my favorite joke. There's a lady that walks to work every day, and one day she walks right by a pet store. And in the doorway of the pet store, there's a parrot sitting on a perch. And as the lady approaches, the parrot says, "Hey, lady, you are really ugly." Well, she's just totally taken aback at this bird speaking to her like that, but she goes on to work. She works all day, but she keeps thinking about this incident. She's kind of concerned because that evening she walks back home the same way. And the parrot is still sitting on that perch in front of the pet shop. And as she gets closer, the parrot says, "Hey, lady, you are really ugly." Well, she goes home and she can hardly sleep that night. She worries about this so much. Why would this bird single her out? And she gets up the next morning after not having slept well, starts off on her path to work again, passes by the pet shop, and there's that bird. And he says, "Hey, lady, you are really ugly." Well, she's had it now. She goes into the pet shop, finds the owner, and says, "Look, that bird is insulting me. Every time I walk past here, I have had it. Either you do something about it, or I will press charges against you. I will have that bird taken away and put to sleep." And the pet shop owner says, "I understand, ma'am. Don't worry. I will take care of it. It will never happen again, I promise you." She goes on to work, spends all day thinking about it. That evening, as she walks past the pet store, there's that bird. And as she gets closer, the parrot says, "Hey, lady." She says, "Yes." And the parrot says, "You know." Well, today I want to talk about something that you know very well, and yet I think I need to talk about it. Does your brain ever hurt sometimes? Do you ever get so frustrated with the way things are going in the world that you just despair and you think, "Oh, what is going to happen?" Does it concern you that there are as many people living in red states as there are in blue states, and that the country's split right down the middle and nobody likes anybody else? And that you can't go out to dinner with somebody unless they're from the same political party and church and neighborhood as you? We have a friend that's a 93-year-old lady in Dripping Springs. She still drives her car. She doesn't wear glasses except when she's reading very fine print. Still got her teeth. 93 years old. We were sitting around the dining table one night with her, and we were talking about people we knew and what was going on with them, and somebody's name came up that had done something they were not supposed to do. And this 93-year-old lady said, people just bother me." And I said, yes, they do. People bother me too. Why do they bother us so much? And do you bother them just as much? Chances are good. I think we all know what people are supposed to be like, or we know how people are, but what are we really supposed to be like? Well, when Jesus talked about what he expected us to be like, he tended to use very simple concepts. He said, your faith should be like that of a child. Now, children think of things in very simple terms. They don't get into multiple levels of meaning. They think of things as good or bad, black, white, sweet, sour. Jesus said that's the kind of faith you should have, like a child. Jesus compared himself to water, that once you drink it, you would never thirst again. What's more basic than water and how it can quench our thirst? And of course, another couple of basic things he talked about are in a very familiar scripture in Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Salt and light are what we are called to be. But if you look around you in our world, if you look at religion, if you look in the church, sometimes I don't feel like I see a lot of salt and light. Sometimes I think I see pepper and darkness. I see just the opposite, and I wonder, how could we go 180 degrees away from what Jesus told us to do? Maybe we think we should rewrite those verses because they're too simple, as Jesus stated them. So what would we say? You are the grapefruit of the world. Do you ever see a video of a baby the first time he has a bite of grapefruit or a sour pickle? Look it up on YouTube. For a second, everything is fine, and then the baby goes. And I think that's the reaction a lot of the world has when they get a taste of what we have done to the message of Jesus Christ, our improvement of Jesus' message. Or maybe we would write it this way. We would say, you are the Prozac of the world. I want you to go in and knock off all the high points and the low points in life. I want you to turn everyone's life into just a dull routine that's the same day after day. And a lot of Christians would say, I am so there. That's what I'm called to do, is be the Prozac in this world. But no, Jesus said you're to be salt and you are to be light. There was a man that had a problem with his foot. His foot was very sore, aching, swollen. He went to the doctor. The doctor examined him thoroughly, and then he handed him the biggest pill the man had ever seen. The doctor said, you wait here, I'll go get you some water. Well, the man waited, and as sometimes happens in an examining room, the doctor didn't come back for a long time, and finally he decided to take matters into his own hands. He hobbled out into the hallway where the water fountain was, and he put this enormous pill in his mouth, and he began to drink water, and he drank and drank and drank until finally he was able to squeeze this pill down. And then he hobbled back into the room and sat down. Just then the doctor walked back in, carrying a bucket of warm water. And he said, now when the pill dissolves, soak your foot for 30 minutes. You see, sometimes, even when we get the prescription right, we do it wrong. Even when we do manage to become salt or light, our proportions are all skewed. Were you ever the victim of a prank, probably at summer camp or at school, where somebody loosens the lid of the salt shaker and you go to use it and you dump the whole contents on your food? See, as Christians, sometimes we tend to think if a little salt is good, then a lot of salt has got to be great. Well, that's not the case. We think if we dump the whole salt shaker out there, we fill that shaker up full of rules and restrictions and dogma and denomination, and then we dump it all on that food, and we wonder why nobody wants to swallow it. Why doesn't anybody want to dig into this? It's because we have ruined it by putting too much salt on it. You know, Lot's wife was not very influential after she was turned into a pillar of salt. In fact, she was only appreciated by deer and the occasional cow. Come on, that's funny. I don't care. You can be so concerned about being salty that you miss the whole point. Our calling is not to obliterate the flavor of life. It is to enhance it. It is to make it better. It is to make it taste more exciting and more fulfilling. Or sometimes we think, okay, I'll be salt, but I want to be the kind of salt that stings when you get it in a cut or a wound. Because, you know, we love to burn the wounded. We love to torment them and say, let's make sure they feel the full consequences of their sin so they won't ever do it again. This will teach them to be perfect. I'll be that kind of salt. I can do that. That's my calling, to torment people who are already tormented. Or light. Even if we do manage to be light, Sometimes we think we have to be a giant theatrical spotlight shining full in someone's face so that they can't see another thing. You ever heard of light pollution? It's the reason that observatories aren't built in big cities. They're built in very remote areas where there are no city lights to interfere, because when the light is too bright, you cannot see the heavens. Well, sometimes we are that light that is so bright you can't see the heavens. We built our house in Dripping Springs 20 years ago, and it's kind of remote, and for many years we didn't even have curtains on our bedroom window on the second story. And then the city decided to build a softball field down at the bottom of the hill. And in the spring and summer, they would turn on the big lights on the baseball field. And sometimes they would forget to turn them off. And all night long, those lights would be shining in our window. And eventually, we put shutters on those windows, but I learned that, yeah, light can enhance your life, but it can also rob you of your rest. It can also interrupt your peace and your need to get away and recharge for a while. The problem is so often one of degree. But Jesus gave us such a simple message. Be salt and be light. See, the great thing about salt is it doesn't take a whole lot to make a difference. Just a little sprinkle on some food. Salt is good. And if you've ever been placed on a salt-free diet, you know salt is good because you miss it. I put salt on most things I eat, but I can't even remember the last time I went to the store and bought that round box of Morton salt. Because salt, if you use it properly, seems to just last forever. Because it only takes a little bit at a time to use. The same with light. We're not called to be the sun. We're not called to be a raging bonfire that destroys anything we don't agree with. We're called to be a simple little candle. Have you ever been to Christmas Eve service here? Right here in this room, it's one of my favorite things that happens every year. Because on Christmas Eve, every person that comes in here gets a little candle. And at some point in the service, when we start to sing Silent Night, we turn out every light in here. And people begin to pass the flame from candle to candle. And this room, which is packed with over 2,000 people, and those 2,000 tiny little candles, and people hold them up, and it is the most beautiful sight I've ever seen. Darkness has no place in that room. But the light is not harsh and blinding. It's warm and inviting and beautiful. And yet we tend to think, when we sing that song, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine," we think, oh, that's a childish song. Yeah, that's how we're supposed to be. To have a childlike faith and to believe in the simplicity of the message of Jesus, that we are to be salt and that we are to be light. I didn't become a Christian. I'm not a follower of Jesus so that my life will be more complicated, so that I can have all the joy and pleasure knocked out of my life, so that I can have a longer list of rules that I need to adhere to. That's not why I became a follower of Jesus at all. It's because when I read the things that Jesus said, I thought, yes, that's how you can live a life. That's how people should be treated. That is what I want to do. And if I want to do that, that means taking Jesus' simple advice of being a little bit of salt and a little bit of light. Not a lot, just a little. I've heard Riverbend described by some people as a church that doesn't ask anything of its members. Because we're a grace church, some people think we don't ask you to do anything. Well, today I'm asking. And what I'm asking of you today is to be better, is to be a little bit of salt and a little bit of light in the world around us, because they desperately, desperately need it. Occasionally there are times when we will actually reach outside ourselves to a stranger, like when we're sitting in a restaurant and we look around our table and then we look over beside us and we say, "Excuse me, could you pass me the salt, please? Because it's something important to us, enough to break us out of our little bubble and to reach out of our little walls and say, would you pass me that salt? Or sometimes when we're working on something that we're really trying to solve, we're really trying to fix, and we just can't quite get it right, and we say, hey, can I get some light over here? That's what we're called to do. That's what we're called to be. Please, pass the salt. Please, can we get a little light? All right, as you go, think about this. Jesus said, if the salt has lost its flavor, what good is it? If the light is covered by a bowl, what good is it? The faith that you say you have, what good is it? Please try to do these two things. Shake and shine. Salt and light. Go and spread both.